So hello again, everyone, and welcome to the next in our series of new video remote interviews and panel discussions that we are bringing to you so that we can keep you connected whilst many of us are, of course, now working from home. And you'll see that I'm joined today by Mark Tanzer, the Chief Executive of Abta. So thank you, Mark, for giving up your time to be with us today. I know how busy you are. Everyone's really working around the clock. I know you are doing a lot of work behind the scenes for members and for the industry. So thank you for sparing the time. So let's get straight to it. I've got lots of questions. We've obviously been running lots of stories over the last couple of weeks, which have had lots of comments from readers. So I think, you know, there's a lot to go through. So I think the first thing that everybody is keen to know about, Mark, the most pressing thing is obviously government action to modify the regulations on consumer refunds is now really urgent. And Abta's requests on behalf of the industry are clear. You set those out in that letter that you asked members to send to their local MPs. So you've got a number of asks of government. But we were expecting some kind of clarification earlier this week. I think we were hoping for Monday. We're now Thursday. Are we any closer to getting a resolution, and or can you tell us what is the delay? What's happening?
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and Lucy. This is probably the most pressing issue of today. If I can just rewind a little bit, I mean, this is a situation that the industry has never seen before, and which really the regulations and the schemes of protection weren't designed to cope with, where effectively, since March the 17th, the world has been off limits in terms of travel. And that's involved bringing people back, obviously. It's involved cancellations across the world for bookings. And companies are trying to deal with those at the same time as new bookings have effectively dried up. So the combination of those has created a kind of unique situation that we are having to respond to. And companies are doing a tremendous job with their customers, trying to get them back. That's not easy because there are fewer and fewer commercial flights. So we're working with the Foreign Office to get people back. And then, of course, we've got the issue of refunds, which you've just talked about. Now, the way the package travel regulations work and what they say is that if your booking is cancelled, you are entitled to a cash refund within 14 days. And that is the law. It's a European law, and we take our regulations from the European directive, so we've got the same law. So what we've been arguing is because of these extraordinary circumstances that we need to change that to buy some more time. Basically, we're saying extend it to the end of July. This doesn't alter the customer's rights. They still have a right to a cash refund or a new holiday. What they'll be given effectively is what we're calling a refund credit. So because the cash can't be given immediately within 14 days because of the scale of the cancellations, and also because companies are still trying to get money back from the suppliers. So they paid airlines, which cancelled flights, they paid hotels. So just getting the money back has created a cash flow problem. So it's a very unusual and difficult situation because we completely understand why customers want the money now. We're taking hundreds of calls, as I'm sure members are, and travel companies around the world, from customers who say, my booking's been cancelled, I want the money. We're trying to balance that with the right of the, with keeping companies going so that, when we come out of this, there'll be jobs, but there'll be companies and that the industry can pick up again. So our asks to government were, could they basically give a temporary suspension of that 14-day rule? And there are two aspects to this, Lucy. One is that the government says, yes, actually, companies can offer a refund credit. The other is that we are able to say that these are completely protected. So even if you've got this refund credit, if the company were to fail before you're able to use it, either to get cash or another booking, it would still be protected either by Abta, and we've said we'll protect it, or by the ATOL scheme, and that's run by CAA for the Department of Transport. So we're working on two fronts. One is to make sure that everybody understands and is aware that these are protected, these refund credits. The other is that the law is actually changed so that companies can say, we can offer you this with an expiry date of the end of July.
And carry on, please.
No, I mean, this is, not easy for the UK government, because although we've left the EU, we are still subject to the directive of the package travel directive, and changing the law isn't easy. I would say these are extraordinary circumstances, and other European countries, Belgium and France, are looking at making those changes. So it's not unprecedented that you can do this. The reality is that whatever happens, the customers aren't going to get rapid refunds in these situations because the companies don't have the cash at the moment. What we're saying is take the refund credit. You will have the cash by the end of July or another holiday. If we go another route and we have company failures because they can't provide the cash, they fall back onto the ATOL scheme or Abta. For us to be able to provide refunds will take a long time because we could be dealing with a lot of failures. So it's in the customer's interest as well as the company's interest for this change to go through. But I think, we're talking to BEIS, which is the department which regulates the package travel regulations. I've just spoken to them again today to explain to them that this is not a retraction of customer rights. It's an extension of the period of time that those can be exercised in. And we're hopeful that, they will see the merit in that.
Okay, so a couple of questions then. I mean, you've explained that it's not against sort of the customer interest, but obviously Which came out, didn't they, saying that actually any kind of change to these laws would be, I think they called it a backdoor bailout. So what's your view on that? Because clearly that didn't help in your negotiations. I think that came at a time when, it perhaps did it stall the negotiations somewhat because they came up with that argument.
No, well, I think the terminology really matters here. I don't think it is a bailout or a backdoor. It is a way of buying some time for the customers to have the rights they already have, and for the companies to be able to provide those refunds. This is not asking the customers to bail out the companies. It is simply to recognise that they are part of a chain of cash flow, and even if the customer insists on their 14-day cash refunds, that won't be achievable in many cases. So this is a pragmatic approach to, as I say, an unprecedented set of circumstances.
And this refund credit then, if that goes through and they allow that to happen, what's the process? The customer would then either accept a credit for another holiday. If they wanted to still have a refund, that's still an option, is it? But
yes, absolutely.
I understand there's then still quite a process for them to have to go through to apply for the refund. So it's not just an immediate credit.
No, I don't think the process would be any more difficult than applying for a refund within the 14 days. Okay. So the customer absolutely has their right to a cash refund, and they have their right to use that money against a new booking, whichever they prefer.
Okay.
And we're saying, that we need a period of 4 months to the end of July in order for that, for the cash to sort of flow back through the system, for that to be managed in an orderly way. Because the alternative, as I say, is we might see, job losses and company losses, and everything the government has said about, wanting to preserve jobs and the economy at all costs. This is a classic example of where, with a bit of kind of leeway on both sides, we can actually manage to achieve that.
Okay, so in terms of my first question was, what's the delay? I mean, is there a sticking point on that extension to 4 months? Is there a sticking point on how it's underwritten or who underwrites it? What are the obstacles that they're concerned about then, that this is, so it's not going through? Because I think the frustration, I've had lots of calls from agents saying, any news? I mean, they are so desperate, Mark, and I know you know this because you're getting calls yourself, but there are agents, and I'm sure other suppliers, who are literally on the brink because they need a resolution on this so they know what to say.
I completely understand that, Lucy, and I'm very sympathetic. I think the two blocks at the moment are that this is a change to the law, and it's a European law, and that's a sort of technical challenge. I think the other aspect is that people have presented this as a taking away of a consumer right to a refund, which it isn't. And so we've been really explaining to the politicians, to the department, to the ministers, that this is an extension of the period under which that right is exercisable, but it is not a taking away of the right. And we've also been, as I said, impressing on them the fact that if they don't do this and it does cause company failures, the consumer won't be in any better position than they are under our proposal.
Okay, so you had a call with Bays today. What was it? Would you say it was promising? Would you say that you think you're moving, like, could we get something by the end of the week? I think that's what people really need to know.
Well, I don't, it is impossible to say the timelines on which the government moves. I think we've provided Bays and other departments with data, with evidence and with arguments. There's no doubt that these are being heard at the highest level within the department, and the ministers will make a decision. We have made very strong representations. We're pointed out that other European countries are moving on this, and that we're looking for them to do the same as quickly as possible.
And if Bays doesn't move on the PTR changes, would it be enough if the DfT, which is obviously responsible for the ATOL regulations, if they were supported, would that be enough to make enough?
Well, I think it helped, because I think the reality is that some companies are already offering refund credits, and customers are in many cases accepting those. And I think the fact that you can go out and say that those are still protected by the ATOL scheme or by Abta is a real comfort to people, that they can accept those and they're not going to be left stranded if in the unlikely event that a company fails. So we need both sides.
You say in the unlikely event that a company fails, but I think there's a real issue, isn't there, that lots of companies feel that they are very close to failing. So I mean, you say in the unlikely event, but you yourself said if things don't change, that you were predicting mass failures. So do you still think that could happen?
Well, I think if companies are obliged or forced to provide cash refunds, which they don't have, then that is going to push them towards failure. They are not getting cash in, and they are being forced to push cash out. So there is a scenario under which, yes, you could see many companies struggling. But I think, we don't know how long the coronavirus COVID-19 is going to last. We have to have confidence that, there will be an end to it and companies will be able to trade their way out of it if we're able to buy them some time. The underlying businesses, the reason why I say in the unlikely event, the businesses are sound. These are not businesses that were in distress before this. Their trading model is sound. What we need is, obviously the destinations to open up again and consumer confidence to come back. And that's why I think, we should have confidence that, the sector will recover. Yeah,
absolutely. We'll come on to consumer confidence and the future in a moment, Mark. You mentioned it a little bit there, but if you could elaborate a little bit more, because I know you've advised companies you've advising them to be giving these refunds in the meantime until an actual sort of legal change is made. So can you explain that those vouchers that you're giving, they are then underwritten, are they? They are secure, are they bonded against the original ATOL holiday booking, or how can agents be sure that they are absolutely secure until this legal change is made?
Well, I mean, we haven't been advising them to give them. Where they are being given, we've been giving advice on the fact that they are protected, that we're protecting them, and the ATOL scheme will also protect them. They are linked to the original booking, so right. Effectively it is a deferred refund on the original booking, so that structured in the right way and with the right, they are clearly protected. What we've also, with our advice, said these are not the same as vouchers. Sometimes travel companies give vouchers as compensation for a bad holiday or whatever. Those are not protected. These are very clearly what we're calling refund credits. They are refunds against a particular booking that has been cancelled. That is where the protection applies to. The period under which that can be exercised is being extended, but the protection is still in place.
Okay, so if you're an agent that's being offered a voucher, what's your message then? They need to really check that it's a refund credit that's properly linked to an original booking. And not just a voucher that effectively is just a piece of paper that would stand for nothing if in the event a company failed. So is it that right. They just check the small print, or what should you advise agents to do?
Well, we've given advice in the guidance as to the sort of the detail that needs to be on the refund credit that sort of clearly links it back to a cancelled particular booking. And so both sides, the tour operators and the agents, need to get the paperwork as ever accurate on this.
Okay, and do you think the message has got through to all your members? I mean, doing devil's advocate, but I have had agents on the phone who just seem to be really confused. I mean, it clearly is a complex situation, and we know you're working hard on it, but there's definitely some confusion out there. And I had a couple of agents on just this morning, actually, who were saying they just feel very, very uncomfortable when they've got customers there who've lost their jobs and they haven't got the money. They're desperate for their money back, and they said whatever the advice is, they feel they have to give the money back because the priority is customer service, and they've got these loyal, trusting customers. They said they've got no business unless they actually really look after them. So this whole delay and confusion is really helping with their not helping with their communication to their customer base. So what would be advice?
I completely understand that, and I can understand the difficulty of talking to customers who want the money. But if the money's not there, it can't be given. And what we're saying is that just give us some time and we will get the money back. You know, it needs to be recouped and it will be passed on through the agents back to the customers, but we just need some time. Okay, all right.
Linked to this obviously is around the airlines failing to refund customers and their agents. So we've got some agents that are dynamically packaging holidays that are reporting that airlines are offering them credit notes, which means they can't then refund their customers, etc. So I know one of your I've got your letter here, but one of your asks of government was around the airlines, and that's slightly different. Do you want to explain what's happening with airlines?
Yeah, well, again, EU regulations are very unambiguous about this. Where a flight is cancelled, the airline has to give a refund, a cash refund. And we need that cash back in order for us to then be able to pass that back to the customers. And, we have spoken, the CAA are the body that enforce that regulation in the UK. We've spoken to them. They are very clear with their advice that those refunds are due, and they will be enforcing those against airlines to make sure that they are paid back to the operators or the customers.
Okay, and is there a timescale?
We need that. Well, they are enforcing it now. I mean, as to how effective that is, it's not a question of when it comes in. Those are the regulations and they are being enforced. And we have asked our members for details of airlines who are not complying with that, and we will pass those on.
Okay, all right. Now, in terms of the other things on your letter, Mark, obviously the refunds was a really big issue, but there were lots of other things you were asking for. How successful, well, how many, do you know how many members have got behind and sort of printed out this letter and sent it to their MPs? And have you got any wins yet in terms of some of the things you were asking for, or are you hopeful of any? Can you just maybe take us through some of the key demands that you were going for?
Well, our focus in the early part of this, Lucy, has been on getting government support into companies. I mean, the regulation is one thing. The other thing that we were very early on, because our sector was the first to feel it, was saying government needed to provide finance to companies, to get them through this period. And initially, the budget had some good initiatives for, I'd say, small to medium SMEs, but nothing for the medium and large companies. I think the fact that, we've been sort of in the Chancellor's ear with Bayes as well, saying that's not enough. We need to get cash into the system. The measures that they announced subsequently about initially underwritten loans, so you could apply for a loan from your bank and you'd get 80% of it underwritten, and then subsequently support for employees who were put on furlough, sort of unpaid, leave to be supported by government, are helpful, but they're not enough, because we're yet to see that the cash is actually arriving, that members are being able to access these loans without difficulty and get the money now. And also, for a number of members who have been talking about the provisions for furlough, is that they need to keep employees on. We're dealing with customers at the moment. We're going to, when the industry does start to recover, we'll want to be taking bookings. And so saying that, the government will only give the support when employees have been laid off, isn't it? We need support for employees who are also working. Okay. So I think, we've made progress in terms of, the scale and the gravity and the urgency of government support, but we need to push further to make sure that's actually now arriving where it needs to be.
Okay.
I think there were a number of other issues which are sort of broader, really, in the sector that are really important, though. And, the challenges companies have already are severe. we need the people who provide credit to companies to realize that they've got a role to play in ensuring the long-term health. And I'm talking about the credit card companies, the insurance companies, banks, and so forth. If they all, if everybody acts in a spirit of self-preservation, then they will all exaggerate the pain of this and slow down the recovery. So we are talking to UK finance, we're talking to the insurers as well, so that we can collectively solve this problem in a way that we won't if everyone just looks after their own interests.
Okay. We did one of these video calls earlier in the week, and Jo Jamoska from Celebrity Cruises was saying that actually she thought that this whole issue would change the industry fundamentally, and she's probably not wrong in that. And she was saying that a new norm would emerge from this crisis. But I think, what impact do you see, or do you foresee on future liquidity demands in the sector? I know you say these companies are well run and they're trading well and all the rest of it, so there's not an underlying problem, but there is an underlying problem in that, cash is really important, and a lot of travel companies don't have loads of their own cash because they're operating on customer money, aren't they? It comes in, that's how they exist, and then it goes out. But when a massive problem like this happens, they don't have the cash reserves to survive it. So do you think we may see, looking further ahead, a change in the demands on the sector and maybe a change in regulation?
Well, I think the thing to say is that very few sectors can survive a prolonged period where you don't have any sales. I mean, that's the reality. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what your cash flow model is, that is your lifeblood, is new money coming in. I think, the tour operators and travel agents are in many ways sort of middlemen. We're passing the customers' money through to the end suppliers of hotels and airlines. And so, you wouldn't expect us to be perhaps massively capitalized, because really we're acting to transfer money. And I would say that the system of, relationships between the customers and the travel agents and the tour operators and suppliers has worked very well for very many years and been very successful in building a very large industry. And it's been able to withstand shocks in the past. I mean, we had Thomas Cook fail last year, huge failure, ramifications for lots of companies, lots of consumers, but fundamentally the system coped with that. And, new companies have moved in and they're taking a place of Thomas Cook. But I don't think any system could cope with a complete close down of all travel markets, Lucy. I think there will be always lessons to be learned from this. And I think actually some of them came out of Thomas Cook as well, where companies will look very carefully at where their cash is, whose money they're holding, who's protecting what. And that's quite right. When you're basically passing money from a customer through a chain of hands to the end users, you want to know exactly who has got the money and are you protected if they fail. And I'm sure that this will intensify people's scrutiny of that.
Do you anticipate seeing more trust systems? I mean, obviously they always say that actually that's a safe, that their argument is that it's safer because you're not using the customer's money, it's ring fenced. Do you think that could be an outcome?
Well, we'll see. I mean, I think the system of protection, so Abta, for instance, we run a system of bonds. So basically we hold bonds from banks and, in the event that companies fail, then we have money therefore to bring people back or give refunds. And we have an insurance company behind that. So, we have our system of protection, others use their own. As I said, our customers have been refunded perfectly well through the years by our system. So I don't think it's a question of trust funds or bonds or something else. I think it is just the sheer scale and breadth of this event that has challenged us.
Okay. All right. You touched a little bit on the future. I mean, we ran a story from a Deloitte webinar where it said actually thought that the long-term hit to travel would be significant, and singled out cruise specifically as having probably the biggest mountain to climb in terms of getting back. What's your view, Mark? I mean, I know you have a crystal ball in terms of when it's going to come back. None of us know, but what do you think the outlook for the travel industry as a whole is?
Well, it's going to be a difficult few months, Lucy. There's no doubt about that. Even, you know, I'm not an epidemiologist, but once we're through, you know, the peak of this, it's going to take a while for consumer confidence to come back, for destinations to come back, and for the companies in the middle to be able to start trading again. So we're looking at, you know, a very difficult 2020, I would say. That said, you know, as I said, the companies and the fundamental demand were fine before this happened. I don't think people are suddenly going to be scared of traveling when we're through this. You know, the appetite is there. All the trends are positive, that people are traveling to different places. They're looking for different experiences. So that's what gives me confidence that the sector will return. There'll be maybe, it will look different in terms of the individual companies who are there. There could be consolidation, there could be M&A opportunities coming out of this if people see you know, companies that you know, are struggling as a result of this, that you can put them together. So I think you know, corporate finance people will be looking very hard, probably venture capitalists as well, as to the opportunities that come out of this. So I don't think there'll be a shortage of investors to put money behind it, and people who want to work in it, and customers who want to buy it.
Okay, and how will the sector sort of rebuild trust then, though? If you know, if there is this issue, if customers, as we're getting reports from people on the front line, that customers are not particularly happy at having to wait for their refunds. You've explained it really well, but obviously is another job, isn't it, explaining it to the consumer? And if they are unhappy because they just feel hard done by, they haven't got their money back, how will the sector as a whole rebuild the trust of the consumer when it's, you know, when it's been through this very, very difficult time?
Well, I think, you know, we need to be explaining to customers from now, not from just when we come out of it, why we're doing what we're doing and why the sector is behaving in the way it is, and to help customers understand that, you know, their interests are being protected. Okay, they may not be getting money within 14 days, but we are still protecting their interests, and that we are also protecting jobs and companies, which is in everybody's interest as part of the wider economy. And I think, you know, it's you need to take that broad perspective on this crisis. It's not you know, an individual company that has got into trouble, or even an individual sector. This is a national emergency, and that if we all act together, we will then be able to recreate, as I said, the sector, the jobs and the opportunities and the experiences for those customers in the future.
And when you say act together, Mark, are you, is Abta going to be leading anything? I mean, I know you're very much dealing with the very, you know, immediate problems that we've got at the moment, but is there other people in Abta sort of looking ahead at any kind of campaign or something that you could unite the industry as we try to look for green shoots and to move forward?
Well, I'm sure when we get closer to that, Lucy, you know, there's no point in having a campaign at the time when the entire, you know, world is still on shutdown. We've got to get to, you know, the moment April the 16th before we look at that. But I'm certain that when the market does start to recover, we'll be there telling people that they can book, and they can book with confidence in the structures that they've relied on in the past. We are doing, you know, this is not an easy place to be for Abta, candidly, between customers who want their money now and companies that don't have the ability to deliver it within 14 days. And we are acting, as many other members are, travel agents, tour operators, to deal with those customers, to try and explain to them what the situation is, to give them confidence that refund credits will give them their money back or will give them another booking. So really that's where our focus is at the moment, as well as trying to get the government to make these changes that we talked about earlier.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our time, Mark. So I think just to finish then, with the clock ticking as it is, you know, genuinely, it's a real problem for many people. With the clock ticking, what would be your final message? And and perhaps, you know, can you give people? I know you don't know when the government's going to make any decisions, but you sound like you are confident that something's going to happen that would be favourable for the industry. So what would be your final message?
Well, I think the most important message to get across to customers, and those are the people that we have to take with us at this moment, is that the refund credits that we're offering them are protected, their rights are protected, they will be able to get a cash refund, and they will, or to use that against a future holiday. Because if the customers think, I'm just being given a piece of paper here, a voucher, a promise, an IOU that I have no idea what the value is, then of course they're not going to be happy at all. They're not happy anyway because they want the cash now. So I think if everybody can get that message across that this is protected, it is an extension of
that's
their
one that they would get now. This is regardless of what the government does.
Yes, if it's a package holiday, the protection that they would have had under that is still valid, and they will be able to redeem that within, as I say, we're recommending a 4-month time frame.
Okay, so
and the benefit for that is that the companies will still be able to service them, and there will still be holidays to be had at the end of that period.
Okay, and then if the government comes through with the request that you're after, then that will obviously save a lot of these companies that are currently very, very worried about going out of business.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I know we don't know when we're going to get. It's a shame. We're obviously keen to get something definitive on when we might get an answer on that. But thank you for going through it. We know you've been explaining it all to people. Hopefully we will be speaking again, Mark. Maybe tomorrow. Hopefully tomorrow, maybe extending to next week. But when we get a resolution, I think it would be great to speak to you again then. If we don't get something, I think it could be a very difficult place for the industry. So, but thank you for your time, and thank you for all the work that you're doing behind the scenes for you and your team as well.
Pleasure. Thank you.